Hi students, last time in our class we saw the lesson The Landlady by Roald Dahl. It is all about Billy Weaver who gets in a guest house and he stays with a unusual guest. Unusual guest house. So it is very hard for any teenage boy who stays at an unusual guest house. So what Billy Weaver goes through in the guest house, let us see. We saw up to where he got into bed and breakfast. That is the guest house name. So he went there and met an old lady who was taking him to the guest house and showing the room for him to stay. You look at the paragraph 3 on page 43 from your book. After dithering means what? After hesitating because of being unable to decide. He was unable to decide where to go in the cold for 2 or 3 minutes. He hesitated for 2 or 3 minutes and then he decided that he would take a look at it, the Bell and Dragon, before making up his mind. So he would look at the Bell and Dragon, he was thinking. As he turned to go to the Bell and the Dragon, his eye was caught and held in the most peculiar, most strange manner by the small notice which said bed and breakfast. It said bed and breakfast. So this bed and breakfast is you stay one night there and you get your breakfast the next morning. Therefore it is called bed and breakfast. Each word was like a large black eye staring, gazing, looking at him, holding him, compelling, forcing or appealing him, forcing him to stay. And before he knew, he was actually moving to the front door of the house, climbing the steps and reaching for the bell. He pressed the bell. He hadn't even removed his finger from the bell button. The door swung. The door was opened and a woman popped out. Woman came out just like a jack in the box. You may have played with this little toy. When you open the box, there is a doll popping up immediately. The same way she came out and opened the door. So it is simile. It is used as simile here. A woman popped out just like a jack in the box, like a jack. So two things are compared. Okay, it is impaired metaphor which is called simile. So it made him jump. It made the young boy, teenager, jump. Billy Weaver to jump. She was about 45 or 50 years old. 45 to 50 years old she seemed to be. Please come in, she said, giving him a warm, welcoming smile. Please let you in. Billy found himself automatically walking forward and he didn't realize how his legs moved forward. He just moved behind the lady, followed the lady. The desire to follow after her was extraordinarily strong. So he didn't think anything else except following her. I saw the notice in the window, he said. I was wondering about a room. It's all ready for you, my dear, she said. She had a round pink face and very gentle blue eyes. So the author is describing the features of the old lady. Okay, she had a round pink face and very gentle blue eyes. She had blue eyes. I knew you would come. She seemed terribly nice. She looked very nice. Billy took off his hat and stepped over the threshold. Threshold is what? The floor at the bottom of a doorway. So he moved towards it. Just hang it there, she said. The lady said, you hang the hat there. There were no other hats, no coats, no umbrellas, and no walking sticks, nothing there was. We have it all to ourselves, she said. We have everything with us. You see, it isn't very often I have the pleasure of taking a visitor into my little nest. That's what the old lady said. Okay, she never took any guest. She was never happy to take any visitor to her little guest house, smiling as she led the way upstairs. And she smiled and she led the man way to upstairs. The old girl, here it is a British, informal British slang for old lady. Old girl is slightly dotty. Dotty means, again, it's an informal British word for someone who is slightly crazy or likely to do strange things. She seemed to be doing some strange things. That's what Billy thought. It is such a great pleasure when I open the door and I see someone standing there who is just exactly right. She paused and added, she says all this, the old lady says, it is such a great pleasure when I open the door and I see someone standing there who is just exactly right, whom I exactly wanted, something like that. She paused and ordered, like you. Exactly right, like you, I wanted. Her blue eyes traveled slowly all the way down the earth of all the way down the length of Billy's body to his feet and then up again. So she just looked at him, his figure. They climbed up, the eyes climbed up to the both of them climbed up to the third floor. And this is your room, she said. Here is what you are going to stay. This is your room. I do hope you will like it. She took him into a small but charming, very liking front bedroom. Switching on the light as she went in. She switched on the light as she went into a small, charming front bedroom. I am so glad you appeared, she said, looking earnestly. I am so glad you appeared. I am so happy that you are here. You came, she said, looking earnestly with sincerity and seriousness into his face. I was beginning to get worried. What about supper, my dear? She said, I was beginning to get worried. What about supper, my dear? Supper means the meal that you eat before going to bed. I am not a bit hungry, thank you, he said. So the lady asked, what about your supper? And Billy said, no, I am not a bit hungry, thank you. And I think I'll just go to bed. I don't want to eat anything. I will just go to bed, he said. Very well then. I'll leave you now. But before you go to bed, would you be kind enough to pop into the sitting room and sign the book? As you need to sign, right? When you go as a guest in a guest house, and you are a visitor, and therefore you have to write your name and address, and even if you book in a hotel and all, this process is everywhere. This procedure has to be undergone. Okay, that's what she asked him to do. The fact that his landlady appeared to be slightly off her rocker didn't worry Billy. Slightly off her rocker means informal phrase for mad, crazy, or insane. She looked just crazy, so that Billy didn't worry about it. And after unpacking his suitcase, after removing whatever was in his suitcase, maybe clothes or anything, he trotted. Trotted means walked fast, taking short steps. He trotted here and walked downstairs to the living room. So he went downstairs to the living room. He found the guest book lying open on the piano, and the little dachshund, the dog, still sleeping soundly, nicely, peacefully. So he took out his pen and wrote down his name and address. There were only two other entries above his on the page. Only two entries were there above his name. Those who had earlier stayed in the guest house. So he took out his pen and wrote down his name and address. There were only two other entries above his on the page, and as one always does with a guest book. So he wrote his address, name, and everything. He started to read them. One was a Christopher Mulholland, and the other was Gregory W. Temple. These two names were there. Christopher Mulholland, that rings a bell. Rings a bell means what here? Sounds vaguely familiar. So the name sounded familiar to him, where he had heard that rather unusual name before. He glanced down again at the book. Christopher Mulholland, 231 Cathedral Road, Cardiff. Gregory W. Temple, 27 Sycamore Drive, Bristol. Gregory Temple, he said loud, searching his memory. He just recalled his memory. Christopher Mulholland? So he was thinking about whether he knew or he just recalled their names, whether he had known them. Such charming boys, a voice behind him answered. He turned and saw his landlady sailing. Sailing means what? Moving confidently here into the room with a large silver tea tray in her hands. She was bringing a large silver tea tray for him. Maybe she was bringing tea for him in her hand. And they sound somehow familiar. He said, these names sound somehow familiar, but I am not sure who they are. I am almost positive I heard those names before somewhere. Maybe it was in the newspapers. They weren't famous in any way, were they? I mean, famous cricketers or footballers? Famous, she said, setting the tea tray down. Oh no, I don't think so. She said, no, I don't think so, but they were incredibly handsome, exactly like you. Handsome means good looking. Okay, they were looking really unbelievably. Incredibly means unbelievably handsome, good looking like you. Once more, Billy glanced down at the book. Again, he looked at the book. This last entry is over 2 years old. 2 years ago, this last entry was done. And Christopher Mulholland's is nearly 3 years ago. He was in 3 years ago. He stayed here 3 years ago. Dear me. Okay, she said. Dear me. Oh my God, what is this? She said, having a dainty. Dainty means careful in a way suggesting good manners. Here, heaving means making a slow sound. Little sigh. Sigh means taking a deep breath and releasing it. How time does fly away, doesn't it? So very fast it has flown. The time has flown. 3 years one had come, and 2 years ago the other one had come. These names, Mulholland and Temple, somehow in some peculiar way appear to be sort of connected together. These two names somehow got connected together as though they were both famous for the same sort of thing. They looked very handsome. So, how amusing, she said. How here now, come here now, dear, and have a nice cup of tea. So, she invited him to have a cup of tea. He stood by the piano watching her. He noticed that she had small, white, quickly moving hands and red fingernails. Her fingernails were red. I'm almost positive they were in the newspapers, Billy said. I may have read their names in the newspapers. So he is confident with that. There is nothing more tantalizing. Tantalizing means what? Tempting or teasing. There is nothing more teasing than a thing that like this that lingers means what? Stays just outside the borders of one's memory. Just leave it is not in your memory, it just stays outside the border of your memory. So just leave it. Now wait a minute, he said. Christopher Mulholland wasn't the name of the Eton schoolboy who was on a walking tour, and then all of a sudden he just went on. Milk, she said, and sugar, which she just asked him whether he wanted some milk and sugar. Yes, please. And then all of a sudden, Eton schoolboy, then actually she is blocking him there. She doesn't allow him to move on and recall who that man was. And she said, Eton schoolboy? Oh no, my dear, that can't possibly be right, because my Mr. Mulholland was a Cambridge undergraduate. He studied in Cambridge University. He was undergraduate. Come on, your tea is all ready for you. Your tea is ready for you. You can consume your tea. I hope till here you guys have understood the lesson. If you doubt, we can discuss in the class. Thank you.